Welcome back everybody to Games That Suck, where we play the worst rated video games so you don't have to. Using Metacritic as our guide through this journey, we're starting with the bottom 50 PlayStation 2 games, then moving on to a different console. Which one would you like to see next? Leave a comment below. Just a quick disclaimer here, I'm running these games off an emulator, so some of the ROMs may not work. In the event of that happening, I have a list of substitutions I will pull from. We also aren't playing any sports games because they're generally all the same year after year, and truthfully, I don't enjoy playing them. Join me in the search to find out if these games really do suck or if they're just misunderstood. Game number 41 comes to us in the form of a puzzle game called Pirates: Legend of the Black Buccaneer. Developed by Widescreen Games in 2006, The Legend of the Black Buccaneer is so niche that it doesn't even have a proper wiki page about it, and it scored a whopping 42 on Metacritic. Like I said, it's a puzzle game, but not in the sense of having to sit down and put a few pieces together to make a picture whole, but more along the same vein of games like Myst, with less point and click and more third-person free roaming. Pirates' story follows a young Francis Blade, a man who heard a call from an ancient treasure and decided to follow it.
The storms of the Devil's Triangle carried many a ship to the ocean depths. One of these, the Crooker, found herself overwhelmed by a supernatural force off the rocky shores of an uncharted island. Victims of its own greed, the crew of the Crooker had set sail in search of fortune, but instead had found only ruin. And yet, this isle did indeed hold treasure. A fabulous treasure accumulated over years of piracy. A treasure bathed in the blood and tears of the innocent, and gathered mercilessly by La Borne. La Borne. Her name alone was enough to set brave men trembling. This escaped slave wreaked vengeance on all her erstwhile tormentors, and let none escape to tell the tale, except by her own strange desires. Was she served by fellow escaped slaves, or were they demons? The Spanish crown could bear no more, and sent the fearsome Don Roberto de la Cruz to hunt down and stop forever this devil woman. None know the outcome of this terrible battle, and while the greed of man runs deeper than the black depths of the ocean, the treasure has still not been found. Several years later, men begin to dream of a mysterious island and a magnificent treasure. There were many who set sail, their hearts filled with the cursed demon gold. Only to find death in the raging storms and cruel rocks. With only one survivor left to pursue his golden dreams. Francis Blade, man of little account, turned rogue in search of a life of ease.
Gaining control of Francis, we have a portion of the beach to roam around and explore. This game gives you a fair amount of freedom to roam wherever you'd like in the map, but with limitations determined by how far along you are in the game. But more on that later. As we explore the available area, we come across our ship, all damaged from the crash landing. Since we have no business being on this island, we need to repair the ship and get the hell out of here. There are 5 pieces in total we are required to find before we can do so: the compass, the sail, the supplies, planks, and a rudder. These somehow ended up scattered throughout the island during the crash, so we need to go around finding them. We're equipped with a standard sword for our main melee combat, as well as a pistol we can use for some ranged combat, that has a cooldown period of a couple seconds between firing, acting as a reload period. Where do we go from here? Well, there's a cannon on the beach near our crash ship, and what appears to be an easily breakable gate. Doing the obvious, we shoot the gate and go into the creepy looking cave. Here is where we will encounter our first enemy, There are really only about 3 to 5 different types of enemies we'll encounter throughout this game. The main one being these little monkey dudes that really aren't all that strong in the beginning, but will progressively get stronger as we go through the game. In the cave, we have limited options on where to go since some of the areas are behind locked doors. Following the obvious path, we come across what looks like an altar in the middle of this tomb. As we interact with it, it transfers some type of dark magic onto us and turns us into a hulking monster-looking dude wielding 2 huge blades. This is the Black Buccaneer.
In his mind, he heard deep murmurings, speaking of a pact of great power and treasure. Slowly, he raised the amulet over his head.
We now have the ability to turn into this guy as long as we have a full Loa energy bar. Loa is our secondary resource bar that we can fill by inflicting damage onto enemies. The Black Buccaneer is incredibly overpowered, but limited by the amount of stored Loa energy we have. His attacks have a lifesteal buff on them, so as we do damage, we do gain health, which is very useful in critical situations. Taking a second to talk about the movement mechanics of this game, they feel like a mix between the Prince of Persia and Tomb Raider games released before or around this time. Most critics say it feels like a worse version of these examples, but I disagree. I feel that they're very comparable, if not better, than Tomb Raider games I'm used to on the first-gen PlayStation. That's not to say that it doesn't have its faults. Plenty of times I made jumps in the same exact pattern and way with 2 different outcomes. Ledge jumping sometimes feels unrefined and magnetic in a way, feeling less like jumping and more like floating Francis from ledge to ledge. Besides these small flaws, I felt that the movement wasn't too frustrating, nor was it a fundamental flaw of this game. The world is our oyster at this point, but like I stated earlier, we don't have access to everything at this point in time. In classic puzzle game format, there are steps to take before the step you want to take. Oh, there's a flammable looking grass in your way? Well, learn how to burn it. How do we go about doing that? Well, there's these orange fiery looking portals scattered around the island that may also have a barrier to entry, but will transport us to a hellish looking other world. In these other worlds, we'll be tested in a few different ways, depending on the portal. Think of these like the shrines from Breath of the Wild. There's a challenge we must face before we gain the reward. The challenges do vary, but generally are along the lines of fighting hordes of enemies while platforming some tricky obstacles. In the end, we'll be granted with a special power. This can be anything from moving heavy stones to use as a platform, to burning irritating bushes that are in our way. There are 6 unique powers available to collect throughout this game, all being necessary to finish it. There will be plenty of time spent throughout this playthrough, where we will be going back and forth between areas collecting different things to help us progress. Some of these items will grant us access to these awakening beasts, which is really just a shrine we can spend our offerings to level up certain things like health or attack power. Oh yeah, offerings. Let's talk about that. It's no doubt this game has replicated many ideas from many popular games at the time, but this one can be deceiving. Offerings are both currency and life points in this game. Aside from the normal health bar with a pool of life that if it reaches 0 you die, you lose a chunk of offerings you've collected up to this point, increasing in quantity lost the more frequently you die. These offerings are obtained by killing enemies on the island and can be spent on things such as upgrades to your stats or saves on the save station. Does this sound familiar? It's very similar to the Souls games and how they treat souls, but Pirates came out a whole 3 years before Demon Souls, so who stole from who? Probably neither, but it's crazy to see such a widely used meta currency from a popular title series in such a niche, low-rated PS2 game that came out before the series. We meet another person on the island as well, named Vanilla. She's here because she's looking for her father's tomb, so every so often we'll run into her and help her find out the mystery of her father.
Francis was not the only one searching the island. Vanilla had come looking for her father, Roberto de la Cruz, who had disappeared in pursuit of Laborn. She now headed to the fort on the western shore.
What can we do in the meantime? Well, there's plenty of boat parts and treasure to find, right? Thankfully, this game puts all the items in easily located treasure chests instead of hidden on the ground in hard to see locations. The hard part is finding the right path to get to the chest. This game will taunt us by showing us exactly where the chest is, but not how to get there. This is where our puzzle solving part of the brain needs to flip on. We can look around the area and maybe route a course to it, but sometimes you'll need one of the special powers to clear parts of the puzzle. Though from the beginning, we won't have any powers, so most of the puzzles will be in the realm of time challenges where we flip a switch and something turns on or off for a short period of time, and we need to hurry through to make it to the other side. This is where the inconsistency in the jump success rate becomes a bit annoying, but still manageable. So as we scout the island once, twice, 10 times over trying to locate the parts of our ship, we pass by an enormous gate, seemingly unlocked behind 3 seals, but we can sense the immense treasure is beyond its doors. To get these 3 seals, we need to gain access to the locked doors we ran into earlier. These smaller doors were inscribed with a language we did not know as a mere mortal pirate, but throughout our journey on this island we begin to understand what they said and were able to read and unlock them. Through these doors we will be tested via tough enemies and rough jump puzzles. Of course, we need certain powers to even make it through some of these doors, so we aren't able to just get the seals, get the treasure, and bounce off this island. We do need to work for it. Rising above the trials though, we do get all 3 seals and unlock the treasure room. Stepping on through the gates, we find a huge pile of gold and spoils that are ours for the taking. But of course, what is a treasure room without someone guarding it? This is really the first true boss we come across in this game. There are a few larger enemies throughout the game that take a bit longer to kill, but nothing like this. Her name, Laborn, and she's locked us in here to define the one and only victor. Her main attacks are a huge white beam of energy at range and 2 swords for melee. Her attacks deal a decent amount of damage, but as the Black Buccaneer we're able to restore all of it back in just a couple slashes of her sword. We just need to be careful when we're in our mortal pirate body. Luckily for us, we stay diligent and never let up our onslaught attack, and she'll perish at our hand in no time, awarding us with an insane amount of treasure.
The end? Once again, in command of his powers, the Black Buccaneer had mercy on his former ally and promised Francis he would continue to aid him until he could leave the island. And Francis gazed in awe at the treasure.
Now that we've collected all the broken pieces of our ship and the treasure, we can now make our way back home and live an extravagant lifestyle with all of our riches. As we repair the boat and load our treasure, one last test awaits us. A giant crab comes from under the sand and gets in our way of our plans. We must defeat him to leave this horrible island. It's a pretty straightforward battle and much easier than Laborn. He has an insane amount of health. Even the Black Buccaneer had a hard time harming this hard-shelled crustacean. But after about 15 minutes of constant slashing, we put an end to his life and can now leave the island. In a surprise event, Vanilla decides to join us on our journey back home. I don't remember there being a romance between them, but she must have been very thankful we helped her find her father's tomb. Either that or she saw all our treasure. Either way, we're rich and have a woman now, and that's all she wrote.
And so Francis and Vanilla left the Cursed Isle and found a new life for themselves in the old country. Many happy years were left to them to raise their children and to thank Providence for the blessings they had received.
Holy smokes. This game was different for sure. Pirates: The Legend of the Black Buccaneer was an absolute flop at the time. A critical failure, with people saying it's just trying to copy Tomb Raider and capitalize on the popularity of the pirate genre that was becoming relevant from the Pirates of the Caribbean. I believe this game had so much negative feedback because of the time it was born in. People looked to it as a quick cash grab or a knockoff of what they thought was a better game. All valid complaints at the time, I'm sure. But to me, this game was delightful. I really enjoyed everything about this game. It got your brain thinking about how to solve certain puzzles or how to get to certain areas. I admit it was tedious running back and forth from one end of the map to the other multiple times over, but I think that's what made these types of games worth playing. A feeling of conquering a difficult task was rewarded to me after beating this game. And yes, I did need a guide for certain parts of it, since there was a lot of room to get stuck with how many passages were hidden behind a camera angle, but it never felt impossible. I feel that this is the most interesting and entertaining game I've played on this list so far, but we are barely a fifth of the way through, and there are games further down this list I do remember playing as a kid, so we'll see if that changes. Pirates: The Legend of the Black Buccaneer does not suck. Thank you all again for joining me on this journey to explore the worst games the PS2 has to offer, and I look forward to making more of this content for you. If you're not subscribed already, I would greatly appreciate it, as well as let me know how you like the series in the comments below. I'll see you guys next time.